Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'm sincerely grateful to Professor Jean-Olivier Enke for the invitation to take part in this event here at LMAU in Munich. This is my first visit to this prestigious university and to this wonderful city. And it is a real honor to be with you today to reflect on such an important topic for the life and mission of the Church. Let me begin by referring to the theme proposed by the organizers, the Church and Family Life. In the flyer we read that as a mother figure, the Church plays a pastoral role in supporting families and offering a gospel-inspired vision of family life. These words invite us to understand the Church as a maternal presence, a Church that does not remain distant from the joys and struggles of families, but walks with them, listens to them, supports them, and helps them rediscover the beauty and responsibility of family life in the light of the gospel. It is within this framework that I have chosen the title of my presentation, The Role of Family Pastoral Accompaniment in Addressing Contemporary Challenges, an assessment 10 years after Amoris Laetitia. Through this title, I would like to connect the theme of our event with this one of the most significant ecclesial reflections on family life in recent decades, and to consider how its pastoral vision continues to challenge and inspire the Church's mission with families today. I have to add that Professor Borden is not now here, but I think that this presentation maybe is very complementary with the previous. So I'm happy to show you like another perspective. In this regard, Amoris Laetitia has helped the Church to understand more deeply the need for family accompaniment. It has reminded us that families do not live in abstract situations, but in concrete circumstances marked by beauty and fragility. We have spoke a lot of this, strength and weakness. For this reason, the Church's pastoral response must also involve drawing near to families, walking with them, and helping them discern how to live their vocation in real conditions of their lives. From this perspective, family accompaniment, as we will see later, is not simply a method or a pastoral strategy. It is an expression of the Church's maternal care and mission, rooted in the gospel, expressed through closenesses and compassion. So this is the scheme of my presentation. We talk about the changes families are experiencing worldwide, which are, in our view, the key aspects of this postmodern cultural context, the theological roots of family accompaniment, what means to accompany families today, and what means especially accompanying within the Church. Since 2004, our Institute for Advanced Family Studies has been working in research and formation on the family. Over these years, we have tried to understand the transformations affecting families around the world, the cultural roots of these transformations, and their impact on family life. This work has led us, above all, to ask what is needed today in order to accompany and strengthen families in a more realistic and effective way. This question becomes especially important when we consider how deeply the cultural framework surrounding the family has changed since the second half of the last century. So before speaking directly about accompaniment, we need to look first at the new situations families are facing today, and then at some key aspects of the cultural context in which these situations have emerged. The first point to note is not only the speed of contemporary social change, but also the depth of this impact on the daily lives of families. The way individuals and families live today is very different from what it was even 20 or 30 years ago. These challenges affect family relationships, the organization of time, the education of children, and the way women and men understand their responsibilities within the home. Amoris Laetitia invites us to take this reality seriously, not in order to accept every cultural trend uncritically, but in order to understand the concrete situations in which families live today. One clear example is the presence of technology in the home. Smartphones and digital devices have changed family relationships, making it possible to be physically present, but mentally and emotionally absent. Another major change concerned the relationship between women and men within family life. Women's full participation in the labor market and the development of equality policies have transformed the balance between work, care, and domestic responsibilities. At the same time, the emergence of new fatherhood is a positive sign. Many men are more present in the home and more involved in the daily care of the children. All this calls for a renewed way of looking at the family. This is precisely the pastoral horizon opened up by Amoris Laetitia. Not an abstract synthesis, but an invitation to encourage and accompany families in their concrete cultural context, starting from real families with their joys, hopes, difficulties, and challenges. Let us see which are, on our view, the key aspects, some of the key aspects of the postmodern cultural context. Cardinal Carlo Caffarra strongly advocated a new culture of the family, calling for the removal of the cataracts of ideologies. Cataracts, no? This thing that don't allow us to see well. The cataracts of ideology that blind people today so they might discover the original truth about the family. In other words, we need to identify those elements of postmodern culture that have gradually weakened confidence in the solid foundation of family relationships. The first of these cataracts is individualism. It strongly marks postmodern culture and reflects at its root a mistaken understanding of human person. The idea that we are autonomous and self-sufficient, as if fulfillment could be achieved without deep and lasting relationships with others. This outlook obscures, both intellectually and practically, a fundamental truth about the human person. We are family beings, called into existence by love and destined for love through the sincere gift of ourselves. As a result, we may unconsciously reject the importance of relationships for our integral development and happiness. One of the clearest consequences of this mentality, as we see in the West, in many West countries, is loneliness. As Pope Benedict XVI reminded us, loneliness is one of the deepest wounds of our time. Against this individualistic view, the biblical account of creation offers a very different understanding of the human person. When Genesis tells us that it is not good that the man, the woman, should be alone, it reveals a fundamental truth. We are created for relationship, encounter, and communion. This biblical insight finds a strong expression in personalist anthropology, which understands the human person not as an isolated individual, but as a relational being. We live from others because each of us receives life, care, love, and support, and we also live for others because each of us is called to give, to serve, and to accompany. From this perspective, accompaniment is not something accidental or secondary. If the human person grows and reaches fulfillment through bonds with others, then accompaniment belongs to the very structure of human life. This individualism is deeply present in our daily lives, and no one is completely untouched by its influence. Even in families that do not accept individualism as a theoretical principle, individualistic patterns of life may still be adopted, often unconsciously. Some concrete manifestations of this mentality can be observed today in many homes, where there is a little shared time in family life. Meals together, family celebrations, and ordinary moments of conversation are often given little importance. Spouses may gradually develop parallel professional and social lives with few shared friendships, interests, or even material goods. In this way, the creation of an authentic community of life and love becomes increasingly difficult. Ultimately, what becomes harder to grasp is the importance of bonds themselves, those bonds that constitute the foundational pillars of the family. From this individualistic view of person and of relationships, another ideological cataract naturally follows, a pessimistic view of the family. If relationships are understood mainly as limits to personal freedom, the family can easily appear as a burden on personal and professional development, or as a fragile project with little chance of lasting success. For instance, it is not uncommon to find married couples, especially younger ones, who experience real difficulty in building a shared life project. Marriage may be seen primarily in terms of individual fulfillment, as an addition to one's personal life, something that may improve it or bring happiness, but it is seen as an individualistic way. Consequently, difficulties and crises in family life are no longer seen as a normal part of growth in personal relationships, but rather as signs of failure. Situations that in the past might have been understood as growth crises are now often interpreted as sufficient reasons for rupture. Much of this anthropological pessimism comes from the tendency to present an ideal model of the family that does not truly correspond to reality. As Amoris Laetitia emphasized, there is no stereotype of ideal family, but rather a challenging mosaic made up of many different realities with all their joys, hopes, and problems. The document also recognizes that at times marriage has been presented in overly abstract terms, making it seem distant from the concrete situations and real possibilities of families. What we encounter instead in real life are people of flesh and blood, marked by limitations and imperfections, who try to live their family vocation as best as they can. To all this, we should add another cataract: the difficulty of communicating the truth about the family in a language that can be understood and received today. It is still common to speak about love in a voluntaristic way, as if love were mainly a matter of effort, duty, or moral obligation. This language is often difficult for younger generation to grasp, since many of them approach reality less through abstract concepts and more through emotion, experience, personal meaning, and concrete witness. This does not mean abandoning the truth about the love, marriage, and family life, of course. Rather, it means finding a way to express that truth more adequately. A language that speaks not only to the mind, but also to the heart and to lived experience. The challenge today is not simply to explain concepts more clearly, but to help young people encounter the truth about the family as something beautiful, meaningful, and possible for their own lives. This experiential dimension is essential because today's family crisis is not only a crisis of ideas. It is also, and in my opinion, above all, a crisis of bonds. Many people today lack experiences of belonging, trust, stability, and shared life. This is why loneliness, as I said before, has become one of the deepest wounds of our time. Let us see some ideas about which are the theological roots of the concept of accompaniment that I will explain after. The affirmation of the Genesis, "It is not good that the man and the woman should be alone," finds a profound pastoral fulfillment in the way Christ accompanies human beings in the gospel. Christ reveals that God's response to human loneliness is not merely instruction, but presence. A presence that walks with, listens, enlightens, heals, and sends forth. In this sense, the encounter with the disciples on the road of Emmaus can be seen as the prototype of all Christian accompaniment. Jesus draws near, walks with them, listens to their disappointment, illuminates their experience with the scriptures, and gradually opens their eyes. His presence transforms their sadness into hope and sends them back on mission. Seen in this light, accompaniment, as you see, is not merely a strategy or a pastoral method. It is an intrinsic requirement of Christian love and a participation in the work of the Holy Spirit. Christ wants to accompany every person, and he does so through Christians who become instruments of his closeness, mercy, and charity. If we look at the teaching of the Church, we see that the need for family accompaniment did not begin with Amoris Laetitia. Since the Second Vatican Council, the Church's magisterium has progressively developed a pastoral vision in which families are not only taught, but also supported, strengthened, and accompanied in the concrete circumstances of their lives. What Amoris Laetitia does is to bring this intuition to the center of family pastoral care, presenting accompaniment as a style of ecclesial presence. Precisely because the word accompaniment has become so familiar in pastoral discourse, as synodality, for example, no? We repeat a lot this word. No? Accompaniment is a nice word, is very touching, but there is a risk that we may speak about it often without going deep enough. In the Church, we often say that families need to be accompanied, but sometimes this remains only a word. We continue offering pastoral services, organizing activities, and giving advice without really changing the way we approach, listen to, and interact with families. For this reason, we need to ask more seriously what accompaniment truly implies. It cannot simply be a new word for all practices. If it is taken seriously, it should transform our pastoral style and become a concrete way of being present to families in their real lives. What does it really mean to accompany families? And how can this accompaniment become a real pastoral practice in the life of the Church? This is precisely why in our institute we have devoted time and effort to reflecting on the real meaning of the action to accompany. We have tried to move beyond the general use of the word and to ask what accompaniment actually requires in practice, especially in pastoral work with families. Now, I would like to share with you some of our most important conclusions we have reached in this reflection. To accompany means, in its deepest sense, to share space and time with another person. The word is often explained through the Latin roots cum and panis, to share bread with someone, to sit at the same table, to share meal. This image is very meaningful because accompaniment is not something abstract. It means entering with respect and discretion into the concrete events of another person's or family's life. The essence of accompaniment lies in the conscious decision to support another person, family, without imposing oneself, without taking control, and without replacing the other person's freedom and responsibility. True accompaniment respects autonomy, but it does not leave the person alone. It offers presence, support, guidance, and trust. From this perspective, we can identify 4 essential aspects of accompaniment. These aspects can help us understand more clearly both the meaning and the pastoral scope of accompaniment. First, accompaniment requires presence. To accompany someone or a family means being close to them, not only in words, but also in the concrete places where their life unfolds. In the case of families, this means being present where families actually live, meet, and build relationships in parishes, schools, associations, neighborhoods, places of work, leisure, and rest. Family accompaniment must take place in the real spaces of family life, where joys and difficulties are experienced, where relationships are built, and where support is truly needed. Second, accompaniment implies establishing a bond. It is impossible to accompany others without entering into a real relationship with them. And every real relationship involves accepting a certain vulnerability before the other. This is the anthropological foundation of accompaniment. For this reason, accompaniment should not be confused with a tactic, a pastoral technique, or a method of making programs more successful. To accompany means to establish, I repeat, a personal relationship based on trust. And trust, of course, cannot be imposed. It can only be offered, received, and patiently built over time. Third, to accompany does not mean directing others, making decisions on their behalf, or trying to solve their problems for them. In the past, pastoral support for families was often understood in a rather directive way, as giving advice, offering instructions, or telling people what they should do. Of course, guidance and teaching are necessary, but accompaniment requires more than giving answers. It also means respecting the essential role of freedom in the process of growth and formation. To accompany is to help people recognize their own resources, face their difficulties with responsibility, and gradually discover the steps they are able to take. This perspective is central to Amoris Laetitia. To accompany does not mean replacing personal responsibility or deciding for others. The Church is called to form consciences, not to replace them, to offer paths of growth, not simply external impositions. That is why true accompaniment requires respect for freedom, graduality, discernment, and trust in the action of grace in people's concrete lives. Fourth, accompaniment should not be limited to moments of crisis. It should also be seen as a form of preparation, helping families to face the conflicts and difficulties that inevitably arise in family life. Every family experiences moments in which tensions increase, relationships relationships are tested or circumstances become particularly demanding. Accompaniment, therefore, starts from a fundamental premise. A crisis is not necessarily an irreparable failure. While every crisis contains a real threat, it can also become a challenge and an opportunity for growth, renewal, and deeper discovery of the persons and relationships involved. Here, Amoris Laetitia is especially realistic. Francis underlines that every family experiences crisis, and that this crisis should not immediately be interpreted as failures. They can become moments of growth, purification, and renewed maturity. It is therefore good to accompany spouses so that they can face crisis without making hasty decisions, and so that they may discover resources for reconciliation and deeper communion. What we have said so far shows that accompaniment is a slow, almost artisanal process. It cannot be rushed. It requires time and patience because its fruits do not appear immediately. They grow gradually through presence, trust, and shared life. Let us see how the church can become or be more a space for accompaniment of families. As noted above, accompaniment is not simply a matter of carrying out effective pastoral programs. It begins from the conviction that God does not want anyone to feel alone. In this sense, accompaniment belongs to the heart of church mission. The gospel itself has been handed on to us through witnesses, through people who in one way or another have accompanied us on our journey of faith. If accompaniment requires bonds of trust, the church is called to be a privileged place where people can accompany and be accompanied, especially families. Family accompaniment is not simply, as I said several times, but I want to repeat it again, it's not simply another pastoral program. As Amoris Laetitia emphasizes, the church seeks to reach out to families so that they may discover the best way to overcome the difficulties they encounter in their journey through life. It belongs to the heart of the church mission because God does not want anyone to feel alone. This requires more than giving information or providing isolated services. The educational emergency calls for a formation suited to today's culture, one that educates in freedom and helps each person and each family respond to their concrete circumstances. Since the beginning of his pontificate, Pope Francis stressed the need for close and realistic accompaniment. In this context, Amoris Laetitia places accompaniment at the center of pastoral conversion, a family ministry connected with real problems, supported by well-formed pastoral workers, and capable of working with every family. The document Catechumenal Pathways for Married Life from Didacastery for Laity, Family and Life develops this intuition in a concrete way. It describes formation not as merely sharing notions or imparting skills, but as guiding, assisting, and being close to couples along a path to walk together. Accompaniment is therefore a style that must be learned, gradual, welcoming, supportive, rooted in witness, and able to create an atmosphere of friendship, trust, and closenesses. It also raises the practical questions of how the Church can truly work with families and help them discover the beauty of their calling. Amoris Laetitia, for example, help us identify privileged moments of this accompaniment, preparation for marriage, and the first years of married life. In both moments, couples need not only doctrine and programs, but credible witnesses. As St. Paul VI observed, people listen to teachers when they are also witnesses. The Church has always transmitted the faith through such witness. The gospel itself has been handed on to us through witnesses, through people who in one way or another have accompanied us on our journey of faith. As I said before, the first evangelization took place within the Domus Ecclesiae, homes that offered welcome, prayer, fraternity, and shared life. St. John Paul II understood this clearly when he created the group of young couples known as Sodorisco, an environment of friendship and trust, in which accompaniment became a lived experience. Amoris Laetitia points in the same direction when it calls for spaces of accompaniment and guidance, and describes the parish as a family of families. Seen in this light, family pastoral care cannot be reduced to spiritual services or occasional interventions. Families need credible points of reference and true ecclesial home, real spaces where they can feel welcomed, supported, and part of a living community. This is what St. Paul II meant when he insisted that apostolic initiatives must be rooted in sincere love, sharing people's joys and sufferings, attending to their real needs, and offering deep and genuine friendship. At the same time, the family itself has a privileged role. As Pérez Soba points out, the family is the first and most natural setting for accompaniment. It is a school of love whose method of formation is shared life itself. There, one learns to be loved, to trust, to forgive, to care, and to make a sincere gift of oneself. The love between husband and wife also becomes the first remote preparation for the children's future vocation to marriage. Christian spouses are therefore called to accompany one another and together their children. The family becomes a domestic church when it ensures that no one feels alone and, aware of its own vocation, becomes capable of accompanying others as a communion of persons and a light for the world. Finally, because there are no ideal families or perfect families, all of us need to be accompanied, and can also accompany others through small acts of presence, care, listening, and support. This is the logic that Amoris Laetitia expresses in chapter 8, with the verbs accompany, discern, and integrate. The Church accompanies her most fragile children with attention and care, not by lowering the Christian ideal, but to following the logic of mercy, patience, and gradual growth. A final important aspect concerns formation. How we prepare ourselves in order to accompany families effectively. To accompany well, we need both competence and attitude. Competence requires knowledge of the family, about family relationships, of the cultural context, as we see at the beginning of this talk, and of the strengths and difficulties the real families experience today. It is also important to know and learn how to use specific tools, such as communication skills, emotional management, techniques of mediation, active listening, and forms of interaction that help strengthen family resources. All of this must be done with respect for the nature of family relationships, which are very different from other kinds of human relationships. I mean that techniques of mediation, for example, is not the same to mediate in a company than to mediate in a family. So the context is different, and if we want to train in this, we have to know how are family relationships, so to apply well these techniques, no, to family. And then competence, I said competence and attitude, on the other hand, refers to a way of approaching others that seeks to build a relationship of trust with the people we wish to accompany. This means leaving behind pessimistic attitudes or positions trapped in catastrophism. We all know that we live in a complex context with real obstacles. But without ceasing to be realistic, we must cultivate an attitude of optimism and hope, grounded in the conviction that family relationships possess a great cohesive strength. Together with this, I think it is also important to cultivate an attitude of humility. The humility needed to accompany in ordinary life through small actions, which always bear fruit. And also the humility needed to make use of the spaces for accompaniment that each of us has within reach. In this sense, we should trust in the effectiveness of many small contributions. And now I go to conclusion. Although this task may appear daunting in a cultural climate often marked by family fragility, as we spoke together before, fragility, breakdown, and divorce, the witness of a few deeply committed families can have a significant influence on the wider society. Just as the culture of family failure was not shaped by ideas alone, but also by practices, harmful practices maybe, so a genuine culture of the family must be rebuilt not merely through abstract concepts, but through practices and concrete lifestyles capable of showing the beauty and strength of family life. We must also be aware that those of us who work in favor of the family are today, almost in the West, in a certain sense, countercultural. According to the philosopher Rozak, counterculture is made of those social structures and tendencies that stand in opposition to those established in a given society. In this context, the family becomes an element, the family today becomes an element of resistance to some of the great forces of postmodernity: lack of commitment, relational poverty, loneliness, and self-referentiality. But counterculture also means creating a new culture. For this reason, it requires a positive and hopeful attitude rooted in the conviction that the Christian proposal responds to the deepest desires of human heart: the desire to love and to be loved. This brings us back to the biblical truth mentioned earlier. It is not good that the man should be alone. We were not created for isolation, but for communion, not to live only for ourselves, but with others and for others. In this sense, family accompaniment helps families rediscover their deepest vocation to become places where love, belonging, and shared life can grow. Thank you very much.